Okay, we're all set. I'm calling the meeting to order. I don't see Ray Corber on here yet.
Ron, did you get the
Invite?
invite to him? You
Yeah, I
did.
sent it to him a little while ago.
Okay,
I expect him on anytime now.
yeah.
All right, so let's do the
Minutes.
minutes. Do we have minutes?
Yep, January 4th. Jane, you're muted if you were trying to say anything. I'll make a motion to accept the January 4th, 2021 meeting minutes.
Jane, you're muted.
Oh,
There
I'll
we go.
second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to accept the January 4th, 2021 non-public meeting minutes as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I see Ray.
Aye, wrong end.
Oh, good. Ray's on?
Yep.
Yep. Hey, Ray. So we all got a, I should say the board got the report from Novus,
Mhm.
and want to just talk about this with Ray, get his input, and just make sure we're in agreement on our next steps. So with that, Ray, I'm going to kind of turn this over to you, maybe just to talk a little bit about it, and then we'll see if there's questions from the board.
Okay, so as you can tell from we sent I think it was back on the 18th of December, we sent the Novus Environmental Site Assessment Report and in an email to you, a summary of those results. So just pulling those up here. I just want to make sure I speak directly to them. Here we go. So essentially, I guess in a nutshell, the best way I can characterize it as simply as we can is, you know, the work that Novus did. There were two aspects of what Novus did. They did what's called a geotechnical investigation, basically because we had noticeable issues with the previous location of the parking lot. Novus was retained to also do, and because we were putting the parking lot on the Burndy waste site, Novus was retained to do a geotechnical investigation to make sure that we didn't have a load-bearing capacity issue at the Burndy waste site. So they conducted field investigations, which included test pits within the footprint of the proposed parking lot. And essentially they determined that the load-bearing capacity wasn't going to be an issue at that site. They issued a report, which we received from them today, and we submitted that to Butch, Nate, and Tara earlier today. So that was the geotechnical portion of the work they did. The environmental portion is what we want to discuss here, more specifically, I would assume. And essentially what the work that they did is on the test pits that were completed outside the parking lot footprint, those test pits were completed in order to meet the alteration terrain permit requirements. We had to do test pits because we're putting in a stormwater management practice to treat the runoff from the parking lot, which is required by DES. And we did some soil analysis at some of those test pit locations because of what we ran into last May when we did test pits for the alteration of terrain permit at the initial parking lot location. So those results came back, and essentially we have some contaminants of concern in those results, and we articulated and presented those to DES and got some input and feedback from them on that. So the way to look at the site and where we want to put the parking lot is that the parking lot is fine as far as the footprint of the parking lot from a geotechnical standpoint. And since we're bringing in 2 feet or 1.5 to 2 feet of fill on top of an existing, what we think is a cap on the Burndy site, from an environmental standpoint, what's happening within the footprint of the proposed parking lot on the Burndy site is not problematic. What's problematic is the area around that proposed parking lot location because of what the hits that we got at the test pits that we did for the alteration of terrain permit. And essentially, the contaminants of concern are lead. That's the biggest contaminant of concern that was detected in the sample in the test pits. We also identified some fibrous material that was visible on the test pits. It's like a white fibrous material that was tested, and that tested out as being asbestos or having asbestos in it. We're not sure what that material is, but it definitely contains asbestos. So the best way I can characterize the situation for the alternative parking lot site is that the parking lot can go in, but we're gonna have to do something. If you wanna do anything outside of that footprint, we're gonna have to do something to either isolate or remove the material that's around the parking lot footprint. And what we're recommending, or what Novus is recommending essentially, is to do additional site assessment work, because the work that was done was within the context of the test pits that were completed for the alteration of terrain permit. We still don't know the extent of the footprint of that contaminated area. And we don't know the full characteristics. We don't have a full picture on what the contaminants of concern might be within that footprint. So we're recommending that you move forward with the understanding that what you're really dealing with here is essentially a brownfield site. You're trying to develop a brownfield site. That's just the reality. So we're recommending that if you want to move forward, that additional site assessment work be done. And then there's two ways you can go about that. Number one, you can go get a brownfield grant to try to get that site assessment work and potentially the mitigation, which might turn into construction dollars through grant funding from the federal government. Or two, you can certainly go ahead and move forward on your own and incur those costs at the town level and move forward with the site assessment work and then ultimately the build out of it, whatever remediation work would need to be done. So that's kind of it in a nutshell in terms of what we propose in that December 18 email. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Can I ask a question? Hey, Ray?
Yeah.
So if we were able to build the parking lot and say we wanted to develop the road down the side of the property towards, I call it a road, but down the side of the property to the kayak launch. Okay. And could that proceed without, we wouldn't be touching any of the area. I don't believe we would, any of the area that's contaminated. So could we include that? And we still got to talk about what it's, I think the focus that we're trying to tackle here is to make some attempt at getting a spot cleared so that a skate park can go in. Now, I have found out since last meeting that the committee for the skate park have not reached their goal yet. So they're not ready to, and Tara can chime in here, but they're not ready to move forward.
Oh, Tammy had said they were. Okay.
They're not yet. They don't have enough money. Okay. But having said that, maybe that's one more fundraiser. I don't know what the numbers is, and we didn't look into that. But so given COVID, given everything that's going on, maybe 21 wouldn't work, even if we had a perfect site. I don't know, but I'm thinking if we could move forward with some sort of development and that would show we're doing something down there. And the board's heard me say this before. I just feel that we're going to need to clean the property up anyway at some point, regardless. You got 18 to 19 acres there of prime land that if it was pristine would be valuable for a myriad of things, but I think a park would be it. But I don't want to keep rambling here. would that be an option 3 or not? We can just go back to 2 that you guys are proposing.
Yeah, you can certainly, move forward with the project at, any number of different approaches. I certainly think that, if you wanted to move forward with the parking lot as you described, Butch, do the improvements to, the access road, which gets you to the parking lot, and the section of the access road that gets you down to the proposed kayak or boat launch area. You can, and then develop the boat launch area itself. I think I would, there's nothing there that says you can't do that. I mean, we haven't done any site assessment work down at the boat launch area. We haven't taken any soil samples within the easement, which is where the access road is. So I can't sit here and tell you that those areas are clean, but we have no reason to believe that they're not. And we wouldn't propose to DES that, we need to do some sort of assessment work to prove that out. Because again, what we would be doing in the access road is, they did put utilities in that access road. And I got to believe that they backfilled with clean material. And that access road is drivable. It does support a vehicle. So, I would think that if we're coming in there and we're putting in, 8 inches of gravel on top of that access road in order to tune it up for vehicle, make it vehicle accessible. I don't think the DES is going to make us go digging for contaminants in that area. Same thing with the boat launch. There's nothing that indicates to us that there's contamination down by the river. So there may be, but we don't have any proof of that.
I have a quick question. There's black lines going down and they're numbered. What does that mean? Test pit showing traverse bands. Is that flow from somewhere to somewhere else that's toxic? Is that like black? It's black flow.
What page are you looking at, Jane?
It's a picture, 10/29/2020, showing loamy traverse bands of 7.5 YR 51 over 7.5 YR to what is that stuff?
Is there a specific report you're looking at?
Yeah, can you see it?
Oh.
No?
No, still
No.
no. It's
I'm not sure what that is.
let's see if I.
Is that the Novus report we just got, Jane?
Are you looking at page
Yeah,
12
so
of the Novus report?
The one we just got?
Page 12, yeah.
Is it page 12?
6,
It's the only one I can see with black lines.
8th
though.
picture down. I don't know page numbers. I'm on a phone, so it's the 8th picture down. I just wonder what it was. I recognized asbestos without reading about it. It was like, oh, that looks like asbestos. I guess I've seen enough of that in my life. I'm just wondering if that means it's flowing down to the river, or there's a drop. Is it, will DES find all that out too, and that kind of thing, or does it matter if we're going to go?
Well, DES will find out all the information. DES will be made available, should be made available certainly.
Right.
The information that we have collected to date. We've had, which is, okay, we've had a conversation with DES about the site assessment work that Novus has completed to date. And again, they concur with what they stated what we expected them to state, saying, yep, you're gonna have to do some more site assessment work. So come back to us with a scope of proposed scope of work. We'll talk about it and review it and go from there. So DES is aware of the information that certainly has been put in front of the board.
Okay, thank you.
So Ray, right
Tara,
now,
Tara has her hand up too when you're done.
who does?
Tara.
Oh, go ahead, Tara.
Sorry. Ray, at one point we had talked about after we do this point, after we do the next phase of seeing how contaminated the rest of the property is, that there might be some possibility of sliding things to, like sliding the skate park prep area down, like adjusting the boundary lines of 1A. Is that still a possibility that, like, yes, the skate park is not ready to go today, but if we were able to do that site assessment and say in the fall that we had a clean spot for them to stick it in on, would we have to wait for the rest of the brownfield remediation to happen before that could occur, is what I guess.
Well, that would be, that I can answer that, I think, at two levels. Number one, I guess the first thought is, would you, the question, I guess I would follow that up with the question of my own. I mean, would the town put in a skate park in a known contamination area? Would you put a skate park, even if we found a clean spot for the skate park, would you put it in knowing that there was contamination on the site? My guess, that's a decision that the town needs to make, but my guess is not many parents would want their kids to go down and visit the skate park knowing that, just a stone's throw away, there's a known contamination area. So the question then becomes, do you want to clean that up before do you want to make do you want a clean bill of health on that property before you actually make the investment in a skate park?
I guess I'm just looking at like where we had talked before is that most of the contaminated spots are on the other side of the parking lot, like on the solid waste facility side. So that was my thought, was that we shift the boundary of the park to be the clean property that's closer to the river, the back of the Jean's Playhouse, that kind of area. That, not that obviously I wouldn't want to build a skate park on something that's contaminated, but if it's something that's been contaminated and that we can fence off and leave separate and isn't going to run into the existing future park, then could that be an option, I guess is where I was.
Yeah, it's definitely an option. You can put that skate park anywhere on that 20 acres. So, what we suspect has probably happened here is that the corner of the property that's bounded by the railroad tracks and the easement where the utilities are, that northeast corner of the property, there's probably could be an acre, maybe 2.5 acres of waste material that's sitting right in that corner. And it's probably waste that was dumped there from the mill and from incineration, because there's apparently some ash material there. So it could have been historical waste from the incinerator that was on the recycling facility site. So that corner where the Burndy site is, that corner of the property is the area of concern. As you get away from that, because we had one of our test pits, I think it was test pit number 2, it seemed like we were starting to come out of the waste material. I think we excavated down about 4 or 5 feet and we hit native material. All the other test pits that we tested around that parking lot site, we never got down to native material. It was 6, 7 feet of fill material, what's called urban fill material. So, so that corner, oh, there's something up there. So that, the pathway that bisects the site, dashed lines, those are contours, and the closer they are together, the steeper is the grade at that location. It's almost like that corner of the site of that 20 acres is nothing but a waste area from the mill and potentially from the incinerator. Well, that's obviously it's been abandoned.
Yeah.
So we, again, you can see all the test pits that, the ones in red are the test pits that we did for the alteration of terrain permit. The ones in blue are the ones that were done for the geotechnical investigation, for the load bearing capacity, for the parking lot. And test pit 2, which is off to the left there on the drawing, we started coming out of, we started coming out of the waste material. And then you can see just below that, that's where the proposed skate park was going to go. So conceivably, we could, push that skate park to the left as you're looking at the drawing, further away from that area. But again, it begs the question, if you're going to put in the parking lot, you're going to put in the skate park, and then you're going to ignore the area between the two, you're basically ignoring the fact that is contaminated, that soil is contaminated in that footprint between those two features. And then the question becomes, is that what you want to do? We don't recommend you do that, by the way.
Yeah. That's too bad.
And I'm wondering if there's a two-part solution here where we don't ignore that, where we move forward with the DES to determine what needs to be done and at least look at what it would cost to solve that problem between the parking lot and the skate park site, including underneath the skate park site. And then at least get to the point where we know, what is underneath there, what needs to be done, and then make a decision at that point. Should we clean up that area so that we can put in the skate park, the parking lot, and the kayak launch? Or is even that going to be too much money to spend on cleanup without going for brownfield funding?
Mhm.
And then when in making that decision, if it's a reasonable expense to do it without the brownfield money, to do it with the intention that for the rest of the site where it's needed, we apply for the brownfield funding and intend on cleaning that up at some point. And in the meantime, fencing and signing it so, it would be a chore for kids to get into that area. Blocking it off and making it so that the skate park and the kayak launch and the parking lot are really the only accessible areas, but they've been cleaned up. And we may reach the decision at the end of the investigation and the price determination that we're not going to build the parking lot or the skate park until we can get brownfields funding because it's going to be too much. Does that kind of two-prong approach make sense, Ray?
It's not an approach that if I were in your shoes, I would not take that approach.
Okay.
So far we've been, in our investigation and the work that we've done, if you recall, we did what's called a phase 1 site assessment. Calix had done that work. And that's basically what you do in any property transfer. In terms of the scope of work, you do a file review at DES, and you do just basically a desktop study to determine if in fact there's any potential sources of contamination. That work was done. We identified the potential that there were in fact potential sources of contamination. And if you recall, we then were requested to go out to do what was a very limited phase 2 site assessment, where we actually had Calix go out at each of the park features, like the skate park, and we did some soil testing, took some soil samples at the surface at those locations, and we determined that there could potentially be some source of contamination, but it didn't look overly problematic. The only area that was really problematic was in the wetland, where there was sludge material that was discharged to that wetland area years and years ago. And we did get contamination at that location. If you remember, what we negotiated with DES is that let us move forward with phase 1. And then when the town does phase 2, the town was going to commit to cleaning up that wetland area. So, and then when we went out and did the test pits at the first location of the parking lot, that's when we ran into really a lot of problems because, as you know, the backhoe sunk. So from a load bearing capacity, there was none at that location. The excavations for the test pitting that was done in that area indicated at least there was a solid waste issue there, maybe not a hazardous waste issue, but at least a solid waste issue. So, and if you look at the map, the drawing that's in front of you, the footprint that we're talking about is potentially 2 acres in size. That's from the easement area all the way across where the first parking lot location was, through that trail that bisects the site, across the skate park, and all the way on the other side where you see test pits 6, 7, and 8. that's the area that's the footprint that probably should be investigated at a minimum.
Right.
The reason why I'm bringing all this other information to the conversation is because so far we've been nibbling at the margins when it comes to doing the site assessment work, because again, we understood that you didn't want to spend a lot of money on that. So at this point, given every time we put a shovel in the ground, we come up with something. So if you nibble at the margins and just do a limited amount of site assessment work around the areas where you actually want to put in a park feature, I think at this point, the information at least tells me that you're doing that knowing that you have contamination nearby whatever feature you put in this particular area. And think about parking your car in that parking lot, walking down that path to get to the trail, knowing that on either side of you as you're walking down that path, probably contaminated soil on either side. So honestly, I think it would be, going forward, I think embracing this as a full-on brownfield site is the way to go, and
Yeah.
dealing with it accordingly. And if you want to get grant funding, then go chase the grant funding to deal with this. Because when you get the grant funding, my understanding from Novus is, they've gotten grant funding not only to pay for the site assessment work, but also to come up with, pay for the construction of the remediation. And the way we would do this is the remediation would be removing material or isolating the material. And if we're isolating material, we're basically burying it. Whatever we put on top of it, which could be a grass, open space area, or whatever feature you want to, whatever park feature you want to put on it, they can conceivably pay for the construction of your park, or at least that portion of your park.
Yeah, I like the way you're thinking regarding it. I don't think it shouldn't be a shock to anybody sitting at the table that this has been polluted many years ago. If we lived here long enough, I had mentioned that before. It isn't like, it shouldn't be a surprise to that effect. I think getting the Brownsfield grant and having it all cleaned up and cleared up before we have anybody go on that. And you can build the highest fence you want, but I remember in my younger years, I climbed over a lot of fences, and kids will do that. And I don't want anybody on there with that, what's on there now. It's too much of a risk to me. Maybe you could put the skate, if you get this money for the skate park sooner than we get this done, maybe you can put over the community field over at the rec center, or maybe in Woodstock somewhere, somewhere else that isn't toxic.
See, and I had totally assumed that the site was cleaned up when Burndy cleaned up the site. So it was a surprise to me to find out that it was as contaminated as.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think, based on the reviews that we've done, and we did get into the weeds a little more deeply in the, as far as the Burndy cleanup. I think after doing and observing the test pits, I think when they cleaned up the Burndy site, they were really limited in their footprint as to what they cleaned up. They identified a small footprint, which is pretty much under what you saw in the proposed parking lot. That was pretty much the fence within the fenced in area, with the fence that's out there now. Within that fenced in area, that was the extent of their cleanup and excavation to remove the waste material from that area. The area around it, it looks to us like it was probably material that was on site that maybe they backfilled in order to create the back slope for the excavation work that they did. Because when you look at it, you can see it in the Powell asset mapping test pit logs. The material, it's a dark brown loamy sand material, and unless you take a sample and send it to a lab and get it tested, you don't know what's in there. You don't know what the lead contamination is, or whether you have arsenic or not, and that's what we found. So that's probably how they did the construction for the remediation and removing the waste material from the Burndy site.
It was in '98 they cleaned that up, Ray, I think.
I think
90?
that it might have been in the late 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, 98. Mhm.
Yeah.
So now my concern is we're going to lose the grant that we have. And that's not even the major part of it. The major part of it is that when we don't fulfill the obligations of that grant, we never qualify for another one of those grants again, ever. Correct, Tara?
So they did say we have until July to give them our plan, and that we would most likely be eligible for a 2-year extension on that if we give them an alternate plan. They obviously appreciate the unexpected things that we're dealing with, and everything looking like it's going to be moving in the direction where they're getting more money with the new setup. So that they want us to succeed. They want us to be able to make this work so that it's safe for everybody, and that we have something to show for it. That's what we used for the community ball field project. So we do already have one success story under our belt, so that definitely helps. But
so now let me ask you, the average, and this was just a quick Google search that I did, of receiving a brownfield grant is roughly, they estimate 5 years. So say it takes us 5 years to receive a brownfield grant. How many extensions do you think they'll give us if we've got this grant in the works? And you think they'll continue to work with us and continue to give us extensions if it's going to take 5 years to get a brownfield grant?
And Ray, maybe you can chime in, but what I got from our conversation was if we worked with North Country Council, it might work a little faster than that.
Yeah, Novus did reach out to North Country Council to see if they had any immediate funding for site assessment work, and they did not have immediate funding.
Okay.
So, but they are, I don't know what, I believe the cycle for them to get additional funding might be in the fall of this year. But the Brownfields grant that we would submit is not to North Country Council, but to the federal government for cleaning up sites such as these. What we hear back from Novus is that it's their experience that getting the funding and moving forward with the work is usually a 2-year to 3-year time period, not a 5-year time period. So if you can get an extension on your recreation grant to 2023, that actually sounds like it might fit into the timeline for a brownfields grant. And maybe we can get a few things accomplished so that we can show the community that the project is moving forward. Maybe we'll have a conversation, maybe we can have the conversation with DES and say, hey, listen, we want to put in the river access, and, maybe there's a few other park elements that we can actually move forward with. But we would definitely want to engage DES on that conversation and get their blessing to go forward with that. Because they're going to look at this site a little bit differently than they have in the past, because you want to move forward with it. And given the new information we now have about what we know to be out there and what we think is out there. So our recommendation is, understand what you're dealing with before you really, jump in the water. So know how deep this thing is before you actually move forward. Because, it'd be a shame if you made the investments into a park only to not be able to assure people that it's a safe place to go play, that you have contamination issues on site, about them. And then, I'm not an attorney in this conversation, but I don't know what the liability exposure to the town would be moving forward with developing the park, knowing what you know now about the park site.
Yeah, I feel I have a scheduled call with Moore and Gray this week, North Country Council, Michelle, and she contacted me about what the town of Lincoln's going to need in the next biennium for their planning purposes. So that'll be at the top of my discussion list. And my gut feeling with the latest, the change of administrations in Washington is stuff like we're dealing with here is going to move right to the top of the regional
Mhm.
EPA cleanup lists. Big time. That's my sense. We pretty much know that. So I think there will be money. And let's face it, last year we attended a seminar, and I think Ray, you were there in Concord when New Hampshire DES was pushing they wanted to work cooperatively with these communities that have existing, especially brownfields that centered around old mills. They would work diligently with towns to see that funding was available to clean those up. So
Yep.
there's a lot of political will to cooperate with communities that are showing interest in making these properties more
Usable.
usable. Yeah.
Yep,
And
that's it. And Butch, if I could jump in, Butch is absolutely right. And I just heard that in my more recent conversation with Novus. Novus is, they do a lot of brownfields work. They do a lot of remediation work, and they're saying, they're stating that, if it's mill activity, it works its way up the priority list pretty quickly. So, and this would be a mill activity. So,
Ray, you may not know the answer to this question, but maybe Peter will. Since we're officially aware of all this now, do we have to put up signs, keep out signs, or any kind of signage like that to inform the public?
that's actually a very good question. I mean, I don't have the answer to that. I think, you're not giving people access to that area. Nobody really uses that area. The Burndy site is fenced in, although the fence is falling down. And you're actively working to address what you know about that site. So that might be a question that would be better answered by Peter.
Jane, you bring
Maybe it
up a
would
good
keep our
point. I'm going to
tenders
reach out. Jane, that's a good question. I'm going to reach out to Primex, our insurer, and see how they suggest that we.
Well, I know the homeless folks.
I know they don't like signage.
Yeah,
Signage draws liability,
okay.
but it can actually, but that I'll leave it at that. Let me
Just find
look
out.
into it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I ask one more?
No, yes, go ahead.
Sorry. Ray, do you think the timeline with like having to notify land and water conservation folks by July of what our revised plan is, do you think that's realistic?
Yeah, I think that's realistic. Again, I think, I put out a subsequent email with specific recommendations based on the conversation Butch and I, had, understanding that you wanted to move forward without a brownfields grant. So, essentially it's not going to cost a lot of money to have a subsequent conversation now with DES. If you want to move forward with this, maybe we could just, if you want, we can just put it in front of them that the town wants to explore moving forward with this initiative. So let's move forward. Let's figure out what that scope of work is for a full-blown site assessment. Once we figure out what the scope is and negotiate that with DES, the Novus can then put a fee to it. So you'll have an idea of how much what is the cost of doing the site assessment. And if the number is a number that the town thinks, you can do on your own, then we can move forward immediately to do the site assessment work. And, you just stay on the schedule that we currently have. And as we develop that information, I don't know what the timeline would be to do the site assessment work because we don't know what the scope is, but conceivably by, sometime in the summer, we would know at least some information from that site assessment itself. And we could share that with, the funding agency and let them know where we stand. So there's work that can move forward in terms of the project to advance the project. So That's what we would recommend at this point. And also, we can go submit a grant application for the brownfields. Doesn't mean you have to accept it. If it comes back and they approve it and say, yeah, we're ready to give you money, great. If they come back and says, we can give you money, but it's going to take you 5 years, you can say, no, thank you. There's no harm in submitting a grant application for the brownfields. And I got to believe the brownfields money is going to be in excess of $200,000 that you're getting for the recreation.
Mhm.
And you may get some of these park amenities built under that grant funding.
My concern though is losing any future grants. Like we did the community ball field and then we get this one for the park. And if we don't fulfill the obligations of the grant, we won't get any more of those. So
I think as long as we're honest and upfront with them and we haven't spent any of we haven't been reimbursed for any of the project funds yet. So that's not at risk. It's just
we're still working on, well, I look at it, we're still working on using our 200,000. We haven't
Right.
asked for any reimbursement. So we still have roughly 130,000 of
120, yeah.
120, whatever it is, of
Yeah.
our funds that we could, we could use to keep the ship moving forward here. Ray, let me ask you this. Obviously, if the board agrees, and we said, let's move with a full blown site assessment of this property, could that get going this winter?
Yes.
And if it got going this winter, my suggestion to the board is we obviously we would need a scope and fee from Novus or who would head it up or whoever. But anyway, I mean, we could keep that going with our side of the money for the park, and that would show the recreation grant folks that we're serious, and that would add to the, in my opinion, that would add to the case that, if we need more time, please work with us here. We're trying to get this property. I mean, that's my thought. I don't know.
So I hear you saying, Tara, that you think it would be okay though until 23.
yeah, we just have to let them know what our alternate plan is before July. So, and if we need to move boundaries or we need to do any adjustment to the original grant agreement, we can do that at that time too.
Okay.
My guess is we wouldn't have, Ray, I'm thinking I mean, if the board agrees and we move forward with a full-blown assessment, there would be no way to adjust our original plan. The glitches, we've run into contamination, we got to clean it up. I mean, that's a simplified statement, but that's
Right.
it. That's
That's
the truth.
it. Exactly. You're correct, Butch. I mean, you can move forward with the plan that you've developed, and then it's a matter of, again, think of it in terms, you're going to do one of two things. Either you're going to isolate the contamination, which means you're going to fill over the top of it, or you're going to remove it. That's really the two options. And probably invariably the more cost-effective option is to cap it. And we're going to definitely cap, obviously, the Burndy waste site. It's already been removed. The material's been removed and remediated, but we're going to put the parking lot on top of it. So you don't have to touch that. There's no excavation in that footprint. It's just as you get outside of that footprint of the parking lot, that's where the material becomes problematic, and we're probably going to have to do some excavation to get the trail in, to get the skate park in, to get, to get the stormwater infiltration practice in. We can't. DES is not going to let us put in an infiltration practice through contaminated soil. It's just, that is not going to happen.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to. Yeah.
And
No,
DES is going to require an infiltration practice under the alteration of terrain. So, and it's because we're dealing with multiple agencies. We're dealing with what waste management needs for them to, sign off on the project, and we're dealing with what alteration of terrain needs for them to sign off on the project. So, and as far as the project is concerned, I mean, the preliminary design is done and has been done. It's just getting through this. As we go through the permit process on the alteration of terrain, we just kept on running into contamination. So that's why we were tried to shift things around and move things around to try to work around the contamination. But as we do that, we're just finding more contamination. So unfortunately, that corner of the site is an urban landfill. And our recommendation is deal with it proactively and clean up the site, make the site safe before you build it. Because you have to also consider it's not only after the facilities are in, is the site safe? We have to let the construction firm who's ultimately doing the work, we have to let them know what the conditions are out there so they can develop their health and safety plan during the construction. So you don't want to be in a situation where, again, you're doing the site assessment on the margins, which is what we've been doing so far. You don't want to be in a situation where you've done it on the margins and then you run into a really serious contamination issue in the middle of construction. You want to spend money, you'll spend a ton of money on that change order.
Tara, have you thought about, is there any other place that the committee on the skateboard park would want to move that besides Main Street? Is there a different place? I know you discussed it, Timmy said you had discussed it at one point years ago, where to put it, but maybe if they wanted it sooner and if they had all their money, maybe they could look elsewhere too. Because it depends upon the taxpayers too, whether they're gonna put money into it, right? If we get a Brownsville grant, that'd be great, but.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't honestly, since the public hearing and everything on that approved this site, I haven't discussed that option with them, so I wouldn't.
Could you, yeah.
The other thing though is the donation of that park, that 100,000 value is a huge part of our match for the grant. So that would offset that as well.
The 200,000?
The approximate value of the skate park is 100,000. So that's going a long way towards our match.
Right, so in the town matched the 200,000, and Butch had talked about spending some money over there with the land on that and with the DES, but did you want to do it over there and spend the money, or can you change the site and do it somewhere else where you think it would go in faster? If they're in a hurry, because you can't say for sure what Brownsfield is going to do.
If we change the site, we would have to go back to the beginning.
You would.
Because we've been approved for this site for this project.
Okay.
Wait, and now Tara, you're talking about for grant purposes, that
Right.
this grant was for that particular site.
Right.
So
We
we could
literally
go
have a
off-
property map with those boundaries.
Yeah.
So if we
okay,
change
we could go
that,
off and build the skateboard park, whatever, throw it at the community center.
right,
We still have a grant to develop a park on this 20-ish acres that we would either move forward without the skateboard park because it's somewhere else, or we'd abandon and lose the grant, correct?
correct. We would just, if we didn't have the skateboard park as part of that, we would have to edit that as well, because installation of getting the area ready for the skateboard park is part of this
It's
first
part of the
phase.
grant.
So
Okay.
that would have to be edited as well.
Thank you, Tara.
So the good news that I'm hearing is that there's a possibility to extend the grant that might fit into a possible brownfield grant as well. That's the good news. And in my read of the grant itself, as I mentioned a few months back, it looked to me like there was provisions made in that grant that allows you to modify the grant. So maybe we need to think a little creatively about if you decide to move forward with the site assessment work, as that's developed and as information comes in, maybe we can then game plan what we want to do with the recreation grant. And maybe it's a conversation with them saying, hey, listen, we want to redefine the scope of work in the recreation grant and its timeline, so that maybe you can get the access drive and the river access completed, in the short term, as you're moving forward with the site assessment and potential remediation work for the parking lot and the skate park. So, maybe there's some combination of approaches here that demonstrates progress that the park's going in, and timeline's going to be stretched out, but you're making progress you know, as you go forward here in that timeline.
So Ray, just a question, with or without the brownfields grant, if approved, the next step either way would be a continued assessment of the contamination, as you said, both in the area covered and the makeup of the contaminant.
Yeah, so the next steps here would be to submit the report to DES because they haven't seen the full report.
Yeah,
Then schedule and hold a scoping session with DES on the findings of that report and what the site assessment scope of work would look like going forward. And based on those conversations with DES, we'll get them to sign off on that scope of work. Once they sign off on that scope of work, then Novus can put a fee to it, and then we'll have the scope and the fee and a proposal to move forward with the site assessment work. And I would strongly suggest that submit a grant application as well for the brownfield money from the federal government.
Would that be through DES, Ray?
No, I think that goes directly through the federal government.
Okay. Now, does DES have any money for brownfields?
That I don't know. I don't know if they have specific money for brownfields. I don't believe they do. Most of that money comes from the federal government or
Okay.
from other regional agencies.
I was just flashing back to that conference we went to, and I thought they control some brownfields money as well, but you're probably right.
Yeah, I think it's more of the regional agencies and also the federal agencies that have the brownfields money.
so Ray, in order to submit this brownfields grant, that you're saying that work by well, submitting it to the DES, a scoping session, coming up with a scope of work, DES approval of that scope of work, and a proposal and fee from Novus, that would all need to be done either prior or part of a brownfields grant application?
No, you can do
No.
you can do the grant application anytime. We have enough information to move forward with that grant application.
Do,
tomorrow.
okay. So we could start that, say, tomorrow.
We could start that tomorrow. Yeah, it's the timeline that I've worked out with Novus is to submit the report to the scope that what we can accomplish in the next 2 weeks is the following. We'll submit the report to DES for their review. We need to give them some time to review it. So in the next 2 weeks, we'll submit the report to DES. We'll schedule a meeting, have a scoping session with them. We'll develop the site assessment scope of work and have a fee for that. And we'll submit the grant application to the federal agencies. So we'll have all that done in 2 weeks. And we think we have the budget to do that. That there's no additional budget necessary to get that accomplished.
Okay. Is that part of the fee that was quoted for this last phase you did?
They have in their scope of work to prepare a grant application.
Okay.
And they still have some fee left to do that.
That's okay. That'd be
Yep.
by
So
We could do that.
And they can they've committed to me to turning that out. Actually, they committed to me to turning that out by Friday of this week, but that was last week when we talked about it. So I know they're under the gun here for a lot of projects. So I think we need to give them probably another week to do all of that. Plus, we have to give DES time to review the report. So the goal, I think, should be to come back to the board with all this information. The grant's ready to go. Here's the scope and here's the fee. What do you want to do next?
I like that proposal. I think that's the way to go. I tell you, I guess, Ray, as you know, my attitude has been, I want to at least get something done in this park, make something happen, test and fix what we have to, but after listening to you tonight and looking at the complications and the potential to get brownfields money, I think this is the way to go. We have given them 2 weeks. We'll get that application ready, grant application for brownfields ready, and we'll make the decision in 2 weeks. But I'm ready to wait and make and do this right, which probably means, which almost definitely means not getting this done in 2021. And you know, working through to get the whole site suitable for a
Right.
park.
Yeah, that would be, if I were to say anything, is you want to make the park safe before you do anything else. And I can't imagine any parent who would allow their kid to go to a park that had if they had any inkling that, you know, it wasn't a safe place to go play.
Yeah. They're probably pushed back because of COVID, but it says the EPA has annual grants on an annual basis for Brownsfield related. So US EPA, which would be good.
So is that what you'd like us to do, to move forward and put that grant application together, getting ready for town signature? And then we'll also do all the work necessary to get a scope and fee developed for the site assessment. Is that
Tammy, you're on board with that?
Yes, yep,
Jane?
thank you.
Jane, you're on board with that? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, Ray,
Yes.
I'm on board with that. And you know, I know this this whole process is time consuming and it might even be frustrating. But I want to let you know it's very helpful for me. I know that I've tried to come up with more creative solutions and ideas and changes, and I will say I respect your opinion, and even though sometimes I don't know, don't agree with you immediately, I think we're coming to a good solution here and ready to move forward.
Good. Well, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news on this project. I know how anxious you are and how important this project is to you, but I would be remiss if I would advise you in any other way. So,
Yep. Yep, and much appreciated.
Yes, thank you, Ray.
you're welcome.
Thanks, Ray.
And
Ray,
we'll-
if you need anything else from me, you know where I am.
Okay, sounds good.
And
We'll make
we'll-
that call to Novus tomorrow.
All right, and we'll put you on the schedule either 2 weeks or 3 weeks from tonight, whenever it's ready.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Ray.
All right,
Thank you,
thank you.
Ray.
Have a good evening.
Good night, Ray.
All right.
Tara, before you sign off, if I can jump ahead, they discovered leaks in the snowmaking line at the Kank. It's not a broken pipe, it's a worn out pipe. It's all buried underground. There's nothing we can really do about it this winter. But we've just discovered it in the last 3-4 days, Tara, I think it was, or whatever. We just started hearing about
yeah.
it, so.
It started with one of the hydrants, which luckily was warm enough still then that Ryan was able to dig it up and fix it, but he thought it was just the hydrant itself and found out that the connections to most of the hydrants as well as the piping is just deteriorating under the ground because it's of an age that Loon's impressed that it's still working because they know when they put it in that it was a lot of, you know, volunteer labor and
used pipe. It was
used pipe. Yeah.
It was pipe that was taken out of the ground at Loon, and we got it down there. So its life is over.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So, here's the question. So going forward, not sure what the solution is yet. We've got Nate and Ryan are checking into, but a quick look at, without doing anything in the budget, in our present budget that we're presenting, we think that there's money in the CIP that we could move around towards the end of the summer. There's leftover money from the groomer that we didn't spend. We saved there a few bucks, and Tara had some other ideas, but we're looking at that. I just wanted the board to know that we're going to get through this winter. We got to, because it's frozen ground. They couldn't do anything if they wanted to. And the way the weather's been, I think he's piled up some pretty good snow over there. So
Yeah, last night they were able to make, obviously it was colder last night than it was Friday, so it's a little bit better. But
Yeah, that's such a wonderful place for the kids. I just was researching that every town once had their own ski area. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
we're actually in the book they wrote, I can't remember Jeremy's last name, but he wrote a book called The Lost Ski Areas of New Hampshire, and
I
he
saw
came and
that.
interviewed me, and we have a copy of it. So
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
exciting that we still exist after all the other ones have.
I know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in my day, it was Snows Mountain in Waterville, the rope tow. You could
Yeah.
truck in there and they'd
Mhm.
have a day that you could go up and down the rope tow. That was a big deal, you know?
Treasure, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to fill the board in on that. And
So that'll be like a spring or summer project.
in
Yes.
case Tara has any other comments, if you
Yeah, I
haven't
I
heard,
was able to get, Ryan's been working with, started with Ken at Loon and has been working with him on a contact he has with getting surplus piping when they have to like cut an end off or things like that, for a job. So he was able, originally he was talking 30,000. He has been able to finite that down to 20,700. And then the discussion came up with, while we're doing it, do we want to extend it so we can make snow on Papoose, or any improvements that we wanted to do at the same time? But so that's what he's working on details for.
Great.
I don't think we need, there's no reason, I don't think, to try to make any changes to the budget we're preparing and presenting now. I
No.
think move with money on hand and we should be able to get the place in shape. So I think,
As long as there's money in the CIP and it's not going to be too much of a pain to try to make that up within the next few years, then I don't.
well, this groomer, I believe, from what the guys are telling me, will last the town of Lincoln longer than we've got it in the CIP.
Longer
So
than us.
we've been replacing money in
It'll
that.
be
So
here longer than we will, right, Butch?
yeah, so we can shift, I think we could shift the groomer
Yeah.
There
line
you go.
to another new line and start putting that money in, because we know that's a more urgent, so anyway, that's just a
Sure.
thought. We're
Sure.
way ahead of ourselves, but that's just some thinking that I've been
Yep.
doing. Another
Great.
update, if I can, I'm kind of jumping in my town manager report, but if you haven't heard, the daycare is closed due to COVID,
Mhm.
and there's
They're reopening tomorrow, correct?
Well, I don't know. They were disinfecting. I haven't heard, so I don't know.
All
They
but one
fogged-
room. Yeah.
Yeah. They fogged, and as Ron can tell you, they borrowed our fogger and they set off the fire alarm several times today. But they deep cleaned and had everybody tested. And from what I heard from Shannon, is the plan to open all but the one room that was affected, is what the state has authorized. So
Okay, so that's the update on that. Other than that, well, we had Tara on.
yeah.
Anything else, Tara?
I just wanted to let you know that I have received nothing but compliments from people that are so appreciative that the Kank is open. They, obviously with the last 2 weeks, we've cut off, like we had planned to do little kids skiing, learn lessons, team sports, stuff like that, freestyle lessons, and put all that on hold and said, we're going to wait till we get the situation under control, but we're still open. And people just love, like I've had adults telling me that's their favorite part of the day when they can just get out and get some fresh air and see other people. So it's
Great.
awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
can I ask, how have the crowds been with the limits you have? Like do
Sure.
people show up and then get turned away very often?
So not at all. What
Okay.
we thought would be the major issue hasn't been bad. And I think a lot of that was like, we started on the busiest weekend and vacation week with a parking lot attendant that met them. If they were there to sled, explained to them that the sledding hill is closed. If you happen to drive by the school over vacation, I'm sure you could figure out where we redirected them to. But so once people started getting that around, the Chamber of Commerce and White Mountain Attractions helped with advertising to all the local hotels and front desks to let them know that this wasn't the year to just drop by and ski or sled. So that really helped, I think, getting the word out. My staff was just awesome. They were like with a smile, and somebody would pull in and try to negotiate their way, and they would just be like, nope, go right ahead, like pull right back through. And so getting to see all that, and then they would get their stuff on at their car and come up and get their health check and then scanned in. And a lot of parents even commented that they get more skiing time in because their kids come ready to go. So they don't have to spend an hour in the base hut waiting for them to get ready. So Jim Martin's crew put in a brand new ski up window, which the kids love because they don't even have to take their skis off to get candy. So that whole, we did have one kid that when their parent explained to them that the building was closed, forgot to explain that the back entrance is open for the bathrooms. So the kid just barely made it home before he had an accident. But we're trying to have staff get the word out to kids too, that, you know, if you see somebody doing the dance, make sure they know the back of the building is open. And
So that was the same parent that said that they really like this because they're losing way less stuff because their kids
true.
are coming dressed and going home dressed. So they're not
Yeah.
losing the equipment. Yeah.
Yeah. We do Interact donated six or eight. There's three. I think there's three in each. I think there's 8. There's 2 rows of 4 picnic tables off to the side of the building. So sometimes on nice days and they're all separated out, but the kids can sit out there and eat their snacks. Where it's, I don't know, it's going like instead of the single fish, we have bags of 5 fish. So we had to, you know, at least it's a little more of a paper thing, but I figure what we're saving in the ticket stickers we're making up for and having the limited candy and everybody's just loving it and appreciating it.
I'll tell you, I was over to the, I'm not an expert, but I've been around ski areas most of my life, and that ski area is groomed. It's like a tabletop. I am just amazed. It is really, it looks great. And
Ryan is pretty amazing.
I did compliment Ryan. And Dan. Dan's been helping make snow, and
Yep.
he said, "Wow, this." I've
Yeah,
seen a lot
Ryan
of
is
them.
right on the ball. He's very good at what he does.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have him.
He especially right after that Christmas rain, he saved us because he had
I can't
looked
even believe
ahead,
it.
saw what the forecast was going to be, groomed it out before the rain hit, and it truly saved the slope. So, and that, I mean, I had people the 26th, the day we planned to open, saying, you know, it rained all day. How are you guys going to be able to open? And then when they got there and saw what he was able to do with it, it's really
Heard
impressive.
the same thing. Yeah.
And he enjoys it. He loves his work. Yeah. So that's a good thing to have. And I should say all of the employees, like they are like our ski patrollers. This year is the first time I can remember in 24 winters that I'm not begging for staff. Everybody is just like, what can we do to help make this work kind of situation.
Well, no one ever works at the Kank for the money, ever.
No.
That's not why any of them are there.
Nope.
Are you still gonna have
I made there, but
are you still going to have the ski teams there from the different schools or no?
No. So we decided not to do that away, like Plymouth rental. We're not doing that this year. And Loon Race team. We did have, until the school shut down, we did have the high school and the middle school ski teams training there, but right now that's on hold too. So
yeah,
hopefully we'll get back to a point where we can add extras, but it's just, everybody's just good. We're doing the basics and safe and
everybody,
getting higher.
Everybody's happy, so it's awesome.
Yeah.
The other thing I should add is that we did add one additional light at the top to cover that dark spot on the side of the tow hut this year. And we started for night skiing Friday and Saturday night, and everybody's like, hey, they noticed right away that
you can see. Yeah.
Not only that, but like ski patrol that hadn't been there like towards the end were like, remind me, how many breakers do I have to hit? And I'm like, no, now you just hit a light switch and they're on before you come out of the building. It's not like 10-minute delay. It's kind of getting dark, so I need to put the lights on now or anything like that. It's beautiful. It's all consistent, nice light.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
No, I think it's good. Everything's
Good report.
Good
Thank
report.
you.
Yep.
It's good when I have nice stuff to add to the end.
Right.
We all need to smile. That's what.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well, thank you.
As
Sarah.
Ron was chiming in, he's texting me, I don't have a good poker face. I'm like, yeah, no, I definitely don't.
So Tara, thanks staff for us.
Yeah.
I will
Really
definitely.
thinking outside the box and accepting the change and making it work so well. We appreciate it.
And that's been even the parents, like I've had a couple of conversations with parents. Originally because in past years it's a drop your kid and go. And we had to remind parents that this isn't that year. And so I've had to make a couple of those conversations that, listen, I know that this is what you're used to, but now it's 20
Right.
degrees, 16 degrees. If they don't have a parent there, there's no
Oh.
place to warm up.
Right.
And my staff, it breaks their heart that they can't bring them in to warm them up. So, and parents get it. They were like, I understand that, this is a progress that we're moving forward and we're going to have to make adjustments as we go, but they're just, especially when school went remote and we were still able to stay open, they were like, this is exactly the mental health that we need right now.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Awesome. All
Thank
right,
you.
thanks, Tara. All right, Butch, do you want to continue with the town manager's report?
I think we've hit the two things I had on my list.
Perfect.
You've seen some of the, I think today I was forwarding stuff. I finally got all the stuff to CRVI, our attorneys on the lawsuit. We don't need to have a non-public tonight unless you want to, but I did send that stuff off, and so that's basically my report for tonight, is what we just discussed. So
Great.
Okay. The other two selectmen have seen the proposed report that I sent out. Jane, I got yours back with a couple of edits that look good to me. Tammy, did you have anything?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to change is the second to last paragraph, third line down. And mine printed differently than it showed me on the screen. So it says below what was recommended back then. Can we say below what was recommended 18 years ago? Because 2002 was 18 years ago. So I think it just make it important that 18 years ago, they recommended we have more officers and we still don't. I'd like that instead of
Well,
saying back then.
Well, the sentence says 18 years later, we are still 2 officers below what was recommended back then.
Yeah.
And 5 officers below what would be required based on our current statistics.
Okay.
So
that's
the
fine.
18 years is it right at the beginning of that sentence?
Right.
I had
That's fine.
a quick question too.
Yeah.
As far as, are we all set? Did Rob get to meet with Judy regarding the meeting at the school?
Have you heard back from Rob at all, Butch, on whether he talked to the superintendent at the school or not?
when you say Rob,
Rob
Well,
Weatherall,
Moderator.
the moderator.
I have not heard back from Robert. No,
Okay, thank you. I was
I
wondering.
have not heard back from
Yeah.
Robert.
I know he wasn't feeling pressed for time. He did say,
Right.
we have time to do
Yeah.
this. So maybe he's just,
Yeah.
with all that's happened at the school the past week or so, maybe he's just waiting and letting them work through that first.
Probably dealing with enough stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right, so are we good with the report as with Jane's a couple of
it's
amendments?
perfect. Thank you so much for doing
All
that
right,
again.
I will send Jane a copy of, I'll
Perfect.
send Jane, our employee, a copy of
Exactly. Yeah,
the edit that Jane, our selectman, made.
perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then the other thing is, I don't know if either one of you attended the water committee meeting.
We both
I
did.
did it.
Okay.
Well, I facilitated it. I did not chair it.
I have notes.
I just,
The water committee did vote all individually, and overwhelmingly to go with option 2, for the billing. However, Dennis, his comment was option 2, but with a commercial, some sort of a commercial rate. His concern was that it's 9,000 gallons, and then start charging per thousand. Is that also for commercial? Should we have a separate commercial rate, allowing them more gallons or less, or how? That was one of his concerns.
Mhm.
And Paul, he also voted for option 2, but with public hearings and input from the taxpayers before any changes. His concern was that the selectmen are going to get to change it willy-nilly without any input from anybody. That is not typically how we work. However, 10 years from now, we may not be sitting there. So just putting in there that it's any kind of billing or change in rates or whatever must be accompanied by a public hearing or hearings
Public
and
comment, yeah. Yeah.
and get input from the taxpayers prior to making any changes in the rates, which is not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's like you just said, has been our process, and I agree with that process.
Yep,
So to put that in there, I would certainly be fine with and hope that
Absolutely.
future selectmen abide by that.
sure. Yep.
Yeah, I
There
mean,
was also discussion about irrigation rates and or pool rates, where irrigation only affects the water, not the sewer. There was some discussion of you could encourage people that want an irrigation rate to put in their own meter for just irrigation. So on that portion of the water, they only get charged water, not sewer. There were a couple other suggestions, but that was the most popular one.
Yeah, I think we brought that up. I think I mentioned it, but in the context that, like, I'll keep using Riverwalk with their
Mhm.
pool, such a large deal. Dennis or whoever owns it in the years to come could certainly request to meter that water separately, because it doesn't end up in the sewer. It doesn't. So,
Right.
or even a home pool probably wouldn't. There's no guarantee. But, and I heard that somewhere else in the last few years we've been talking about this, is some communities do that, is they make that an option for large lawn watering and, you know,
Irrigation rates, yeah.
saves them the sewer rate. So, yeah.
There were still some questions about seasonal. And I got there, I think a bit, you had heard that, Tammy. I got there a bit late at work.
That was Paul. Paul is really stuck on having a seasonal rate for seasonal homeowners. However, the only way that I think, and he didn't disagree, to address that would be to charge per 1,000 gallon from the get-go without any usage allowance, the 9,000 gallons. And then everybody's paying for what they use, period. But he didn't like that option either. He wanted to go with option 2 that had the 9,000 gallon usage allowance.
And that's 9,000 gallons per, it's not a year, it's
Quarter, that's per
per-
quarter.
per quarter. So that's really 36,000
Right,
gallons. So everybody gets 36,000 gallons before the rate kicks in.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that a little high? Well,
Also-
after a year or two, of
Right.
in place, then you might want to come back to the board, come back to the table and say, look, 36,000 for a seasonal home is
Right.
much, and you'd have better data to justify a change. I think that's the way to
And that
attack
was
it.
the data issues, like Paul wanted some kind of a guarantee that this was gonna be the rate for a long time. And I'm like, that's just totally
Yeah,
unreasonable.
no
You
town
cannot
can do that.
absolutely positively can. This rate will change often forever. This is never gonna, you're never gonna find a rate that's gonna last forever and be good for years at a time. It's just not gonna happen. We'll be lucky to get 2 or 3 years out of a set rate, and then it's gonna have to be addressed and adjusted or not. However, there was somebody else, and I don't know if it was John Hettinger or not, because I don't recall, that wanted to continue to have the meters for a year and not charge and get data and then develop a rate. And he was
think
the
it's
only one
John.
of that opinion. I don't remember who it was. Do you remember who it
No,
was?
Well, I
Bob
think-
was there.
Who was it, Butch?
I think it was John Hettinger. He
Was it?
wanted to see some have meters.
That's it.
a
Test
few
meters.
residential meters, a few
Yeah.
commercial meters,
Yeah.
hotels and water parks or whatever, and then let that go for a year to see the water usage. And it kind of, the committee then said, well, or maybe it raised Corba's urging was, well, if even during that test, if you're not charging for the water, then there'll be some, there's no conservation
Won't be a true test.
incentive. There's no conservation during your test period, so you might not get the data. You may not
Right.
get correct data. So
And
kinda-
there'd be no income generated to offset the bond
Right.
cost.
And so that conversation, as I recollect, sort of
Didn't
just
go
died
far.
and everybody
Yeah.
moved on to
Right.
which
Yeah.
option would you?
Yeah.
Actually, I think I pressed the group, is there an option there on the list? And if there is, which one would it be? And then it switched
there
and
were
they
11
settled
there are
on two. Yeah.
11 people present that were residents of the town of Lincoln. It was, of course, it was Ray and Butch, but there were 11 that were residents, Lincoln residents, and 10 of them voted for option 2. I am the only one that voted for option 1.
One of the main things I took out of that was what Dennis had said. And, you know, thinking about that, I don't want to outprice businesses because their water is like really extreme. I mean, because it would be tremendously high, but I don't want to make it not affordable for them either. So I don't know how to go about that unless we research other businesses or how do
Well, I
other,
think,
what do we do with that?
I
I
think,
think
Jane,
we
if
go
you-
with the rates that we have and just have something in there that will allow the selectmen to either adjust or waive. You know, if we go with this and all of a sudden, the restaurant ABC down the road comes back with a $500,000 water bill, we have to have the authority to be able to do something about that because that's just unreasonable. Same thing with, you know, a resident that has a huge water bill for some odd reason. We have to be able to adjust those as needed so that we don't bankrupt people.
and I think we're gonna hear from Dennis. We didn't hear him today, but he was gonna be getting his engineer at Riverwalk was gonna get him his water usage because
Right.
they read their meter every day,
Yep.
and he was gonna plug it into the Dave Fox the study, and I think he has a 3 or a 4 inch line going into Riverwalk,
Yeah,
and then that
Yep.
cents per gallon that was in that chart, he was gonna calculate a bill with that, and I think out of the box, that's gonna be as close as you can get, and it's gonna have to be tweaked. And all you'd have to look is the cents per gallon. You probably, the higher users, you just reduce that. I think, as I remember, it's like 0.018 cents per
0015
1.5 for a 3 or 4 inch.
Yeah.
You know, and the larger the line, the less that is per gallon.
Right.
And so you probably, that's where you would end up tweaking your billing rates.
And it's going to be hard with his data too, because 2020 wasn't an average year. He was closed
No,
for months.
But
So
he was actually,
water,
Riverwalk was busy because of COVID. He had a lot of people that were escaping.
everybody was busy.
not March,
You
April,
know.
and May.
Yeah, you know, so it might not be as bad as, you know, it might be closer than he thinks.
It would certainly be better data than nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that 1/4 might be off, but the summer and fall and into the winter, the town was busy, and I assume Riverwalk was, and that data would be good.
And I know certainly Rivergreen, or excuse me, out back at my office,
Rivergreen.
Rivergreen, they were busy. I
Yeah.
mean,
Sure.
they're consistently busy. So
Yeah.
so I think it's probably a decent data, and he'll have a sense. He'll either be, oh my God, or, well, it's a little high. I'll stick it out, but we may have to look at this. So you'd
Right.
get a sense. You'd be able to get a sense of.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think it's good that we have that the committee agreed on option number 2.
Overwhelmingly.
Overwhelmingly, I find very encouraging.
Yes. Agreed.
And basically, you know, that gives us something to go to
The
a
taxpayers,
meeting with.
the voters.
Yeah.
Yep.
They mentioned also when you bring it to the voters, that the current budget, water and sewer costs, to, you know, make it be known that successfully rolling out the meters and a billing schedule with the meters would take that off
The
of
tax rate.
the tax bill, right?
Correct.
Off of the operating budget. And we'll have to go through and figure out, I haven't done the math, but figure out what it is, how much money per $200,000 house it is per year or something to that effect to try to.
That was a concern. Yeah, I don't know how you do that.
So you'd,
And I don't
Yeah.
know if we do that, if we roll this out, if this passes at town meeting in 2021, and we can get, Ray seemed to think we could get the meters, or I shouldn't say Ray, Nate seemed to think that because a meter swap, he said, wouldn't take as long as new meters, that it could be done and we could get this implemented by January of 2022. But keep the water and sewer budget in for 2022 as a backup in case this meter rollout doesn't happen. Did that make sense? Did I
Mhm.
say that correctly? Okay.
yeah, and they also discussed, and I think it would work if, in a practical sense, if we got approved and whoever the company is, we would make as part of the contract that they put the number of crews in town to
Get it done.
complete this project so that we could have those meters and technology up and running in 2021, getting it going so that in January 1, you could, if you
Start
chose,
billing.
we could start billing, and you could then either in that budget that we'd be preparing for 2022, drop it off or drastically reduce the water and wastewater budgets, knowing that we're collecting fees. You'll have January, February, March. So you'd have a quarter under your belt before the 2022
Or close to it.
town meeting, or
Yeah.
close to it.
Close to
We,
it.
we need to get, and again, I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, because our first goal is to get this to pass a town meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
Once we do that, we got to come to a better understanding of how we account for this. I would think we still have to gross budget for it.
It has to have its own separate account also, it doesn't go in the general fund,
Right,
right?
but does.
You'd still
does
have
that
to
mean-
gross budget it.
You know what? I'll start having that conversation with, I have John start having with DRA, and just what would that look like as far as budget, maybe with MRI too, they're doing
Sure.
yeah, okay.
We
And would
also have
that
to
input.
have, we
What
should have,
would it look like?
Yeah.
right, exactly. We should have a draft ordinance, or, a plan. What am I trying to say? What's the word I'm looking for? A draft of how it's gonna run, how we're gonna do the billing, how we're gonna,
Oh, in terms of water and sewer.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sending out bills quarterly.
right,
Right. And there should be separate bills for the families. That's what I read anyway, but.
a plan. We need a draft of the plan of how we're gonna
Right.
do this and under what authority and whatnot. Obviously, it's all in the RSA's that on the authority of it, but
That's another question I have. As far as the general fund is concerned, Butch, I know that people were talking about where does the extra money from the short-term rentals going? And we're like, in the general fund. So do we need a specific line item for those? Also, the planning, there's going to be more revenues than planning. So we're,
Without
Yeah.
paper.
before we go to a budget discussion, can we stay on the meters for just a second?
oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
No worries. Valid questions, but also I was looking, the budget hearing scheduled for the 4th. Should we also schedule a bond hearing for that time?
Yes,
I don't
yes.
think we have yet. So do we need to Jane, could you let Mike Simons know that we intend to also have a bond hearing the same night on February 4th as their budget hearing?
Okay.
And we'll schedule it do you guys meet at 5:30 or 6 normally?
5:30.
30.
So we can schedule the bond hearing for 5 o'clock, so it's prior to the budget hearing or not, whatever's good with Mike, but, and we're gonna make sure Jane Leslie gets that posted as well.
Okay, so the bond hearing.
Yeah, for the meter bond.
What's the date of that? February
February 4.
4th, okay.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up so we didn't forget it. And then,
you.
Jane, sorry, I had interrupted you. You can,
No, that's fine.
you were talking about revenue for short-term rentals and the increased revenue from the planning board. Those by law have to go into the general fund. We don't have an option. It has to go in the general fund and it has to offset or be used to potentially offset the following year's tax rate. We can't specifically put those for anything specific. It has to go in the general fund and it has to be offsetting revenue for the following year.
It can be accounted for in the general ledger under whatever, like planning.
Right.
As revenue, but it
Revenue.
all ends up in the general fund. Yeah.
Right.
We don't have a choice. That's law. We can't, pick and
The
choose.
intention of both of those was to offset some of the costs of the planning department
Yeah.
for dealing with the applications or dealing with the short-term rental registrations. But like you said, it just goes into the general fund. It can go in the planning budget as projected
paper.
revenue, on
Yeah.
paper as
As a
projected revenue.
technicality on paper only,
Yeah.
the physical, it has to physically go in the general fund. We can put it on paper that it's to offset this one for the
Right,
planning.
just like we do with
Right.
automobile registrations and ski ticket sales. I mean, it goes on paper in that particular budget, but it's general fund
Parking
money.
tickets show as police revenue, but it's in the general fund. That's
Right. You can put it on paper anywhere it needs to go, but
right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And whether or not the water and sewer billing would be the same way, or if there's
nope,
And
there's a
there's a
specific
separate number
RSA
fund.
that says that money has to go in a separate fund. It does not get put into
you know what RSA that
the
was?
general fund.
We could-
I don't have it in front of me, Butch, but I
we'll
can
look it up.
yeah,
We're gonna
look it up.
research all
It's
this.
definitely an RSA that says it has to go, water and sewer billing fees they has their own fund.
It has their own enterprise fund, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll all shake out, but I think we're right. We gotta get
So
over.
if there's leftover revenue at the end of the year, excess revenue, I don't know at that point. I didn't I
Yeah.
don't remember where it goes. That John is gonna have to do that investigating. And
Yeah, there's a
but you
lot to look
can-
in.
I
into
do
the
remember we
contract.
can use it to pay for the accounting, the money that we on software and meters and what we can use that to pay for what you're using to generate the money. So we can use it to clean the water, to process the sewerage.
We're wiping out the water sewer budgets. It's gonna be used
Exactly,
for- It's
exactly.
gonna be used for system upgrades, repairs,
Right.
everything.
But any unspent revenue at the end of the year, I don't know how that gets handled. So
Yeah. We'll have to, we got a lot of work to do.
there was something in there that said about using it for like capital, like the CIP. Some of it can be used to fund the CIP for that line item as well, out of that specific account. I don't have it in front of me, but I do remember reading that.
Yeah.
But John,
We have plenty of time to look into that, but that is important. Because I don't even know how we budget for that. I mean, does the selectman present a separate budget for water and a separate budget for sewer that gets voted on?
I would assume.
I don't know. We need to,
Those are questions that are going to come up for town meeting too. So we need to have that information prior to.
I would think people would ask those questions, so.
Absolutely.
All right, I didn't have anything else. Jane, do you have anything?
You're muted, Jane. It's like a seance. Jane, are you there?
Jane,
I'm mute. I know I'm, because I look up things, I talk into the phone, so I don't want to bother you all.
No
but,
worries.
No, I'm good. That's fine. Yeah.
Jane
okay.
had asked last week about the man at the end of Maltese Farm Road with that building, and Ron was going to follow up. Did you get a chance to do that, Ron? I know it was a crazy week.
I haven't seen him. I've driven out there a couple of times. I haven't seen him.
Yeah, he's the second homeowner, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm gonna track down his phone number. I'll give him a call.
Okay. Did you have anything else, Ron?
No, just be diligent with you, wearing masks in public and social distancing. You know, it's on the rise in our community, and
Yeah.
fielded a lot of phone calls this past weekend, and you know,
Yeah, I got,
the businesses and
Yeah.
yeah, we're all in it together.
I did
Yeah.
not wear a mask around the cows today. I see Chad on there too. Chad, do you have anything?
Who?
No, I'm all set, but thanks for asking.
All right, then we have nothing in non-public that I know of.
Nope.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good
Yes.
night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.